Why I Write. George Orwell wrote a book with that title, on clarity. I remember the spine on the shelf in Berlin. I don't remember the words. I remember the posture, clean, simple, obedient. And yet, clarity as fantasy. I fought it all my life. Linearity, logic, good, writing, Campbell's hero bullshit, Jung's orientalist archetypes, Tolkien's protofascist wank. Clarity is not innocence. It's a weapon. It polices ambiguity. It disciplines what should be unruly. No one wants a neutral-ass bitch. Clarity is obedience. Submission. A week before my 40th and I'm still fighting this regime of clarity. Not to see clearer, but to protect what can't be cleaned. What clarity makes me erase. What it demands, I apologise for. Truth isn't clarity. Truth is always too late. Truth detonates. I remember being 13, CSIR or summer camp. I wanted to be with the jocks. I wanted a middle-class white childhood. My Russian teacher said sports would ruin my piano and violin fingers. No one would drive me to the fixtures. They pushed me back into music, science, art. I found a classifieds page in the science magazine, Pen Pals, a girl in South Australia. My first experience of eros, phone sex before puberty. My mom was shocked by the phone bill, STDs. Not the disease, but subscriber trunk dialing. $40 for a single call. I feigned ignorance. Later at school, I fell for a girl with short black hair. She moved to Laos for a year. We wrote ourselves into love. When she came back, it collapsed. The physical never matched the letters. I couldn't be as raw in daylight as I was on the page. That was my first regret. I've been chasing it ever since. Why do I write? Not for clarity, not for truth, but for the distance between what can be said and what is lived. Truth is not fact. Truth is time delayed. My father once whispered that he saw the neighbour being screamed at by his son. The indirect question within this parable: will you do the same to me? Later, in the middle of an argument, he asked me if Berlin had traumatized me. I was livid. My rage towards him had nothing to do with Berlin. Berlin only worsened what was already 4 decades old. The truth? I was angry about the things I could not say since I was a child. Abuse, neglect, the melancholic lost object of the unspeakable. But even that isn't the truth. The truth is the phantom that sits on my chest at night, the boulder that robs my breath. Clarity wants a red thread, a VCR manual. And who the fuck wants to read that? I lie awake at 3 a.m. Is this a return or an exile from exile? I say I miss my friends, but many I chose already not to see. Even before death comes estrangement. A friend died this year. The third in our menage a trois called me with the news. She wanted closeness, a hug across the line. I was furious. Where were you all those years I felt alone? They say the difference between LA and New York is that in LA you cry in your car, but in New York you cry on the streets. In Brisbane I cry in silence, on my undead mother's bed. I spoke about crying during a speed date. The women mocked me. Of all the dirty things I've done, fucking strangers, shitting in front of a dominatrix, flying a helicopter without a license. Speed dating was the most humiliating because it admits the hunger, it admits need. I turned 40 this weekend. I gave myself a week off, away from the virtual, the luxury of abdication. Safe, hollow, relaxing, empty. At a certain point, childish pleasures curdle. Desire does not excuse surrender. I met a Zionist. I asked what she wanted. She said peace. I thought, liberation. Birthdays do that. Draw the line between wish and demand. I wish for whatever you wish for the Palestinians. Love is endurance. Love is incorruptible. Love, not lust, is the last sovereignty. Early in the year, I spent a month in the ICU with my mother. I stood by other patients and their families in silence. Presence was all we shared. Slowly, my father and I tried to re-simulate a normal life. How does one find life again after death? I think about survivor's guilt, anxiety, anger, the impossibility of action. Yet one tries. 1 foot forward, then another. Get out of bed. Swallow the breakfast. At least there is breakfast. The day after I turned 40, I joined a protest, this time as a legal observer, to use my privilege as a citizen, not an alien. Standing with 70,000, I held back tears, terrified when the crowd cheered, because it isn't over. The violence continues. I don't dare celebrate. Even with the largest turnout in Brisbane's history, the majority still cannot mouth the word Palestine. And so after genocide, what is left? What is there left to say? We must live, I remind myself. Joy as a political act. But then the wellness people appear, their cheer, their disavow. There is a gap in which they will never understand. I do not explain. I do not teach. They call me cryptic, dramatic, too much. Let them. Yes, I carry on, but the wound is deep. The yearning deepens. This is not only genocide, but a full assault on the psyche. Tomorrow, when the war has indeed begun, they need no physical prisons if they can colonize the mind. No guards if we surveil each other into silence. When was your last confession? I asked her. I like the line. The separation of the booth. The illicit proximity of breath through a grill. 20 years ago, she said. It may have already begun. The last time I asked another woman that question, it wasn't in a church. It was at a BDSM dungeon near Wannsee, the lake where Kristallnacht was drafted. History and sex are layered on top of one another. Kneeling opposite me was a woman from the scene. She didn't care for costumes or ritual. She wanted to be fucked. Not symbolically. Properly. A friend had invited me, I briefly slept with. We didn't collapse into one another. So I brought someone else, my Bumble date, a tall Swedish feminist, all repression and rage. I dressed her in a Gestapo cap, trench coat, sports lingerie, and strapped her with a black cock. She didn't need mine. She had her own. The 4 of us were the youngest in the room. Everyone else was at least above 50, the kind of aging swingers I used to imagine as a child. Polite, well-fed, arranging canapes in cloakrooms. Charlottenburg decadence, softened by privilege, still rehearsing cruelty in leather. Confession travels strange routes, through religion, through fascism, through sex. The question is always the same. What do you want to admit? And who do you want listening?